Live from the hippest spot online, you've arrived at the Pop Culture Juke Joint, the only weekly podcast you'll need for intelligent showbiz chats. So head up to the bar, grab a drink, and settle in here at the Pop Culture Juke Joint.
Hi, this is Jack Lugo. I just finished watching the season finale of I'm Dying Up Here. This is a show I was sort of tempted to give up on sort of midway through, but I stuck with it, and I'm glad that I did. The ratings haven't been very good for this show, and from what I read, it looks like Showtime has asked the writers to come up with season 2 ideas, and then based on those ideas, they're going to decide whether or not to renew the show. I hope that they do, because I think this is a solid show. I like. I grew to like some of the characters that I wasn't crazy about earlier on, and I think there are things that they could definitely do to improve the show. I think going forward. The show takes place in the early 1970s. I think it's 73, and these comics perform at a club called Goldie's, and Goldie is played by Melissa Leo. She gives a very solid and powerful performance throughout the series, and in this finale, she's great. I mean, you get to see her, in some very dramatic and passionate scenes, because, basically she starts the episode off on a warpath because she had just been fired from the variety show that she was going to executive produce, called Women Are Funny Too, or Girls Are Funny Too. And, she had, done a lot of work putting that show together, and it was supposed to be, centered around the female comics and their stand-up. And then, of course, they sort of, pulled the rug out from under her and decided to go with the direction of sketches, and pretty lame sketches at that. So, when she objected to all this, they fired her. And that's how the last episode had ended. And this episode, in the finale, she begins the episode really pissed. And then on top of that, you have Barton Royce, who is kind of like the pimp character on the show. He had partnered with her competitor, the club King Theodore's, and Theodore sort of Teddy made a deal with the devil to kind of get his liquor license and to make some renovations to his club, and ultimately even got Mitch, the Goldie's connection to the Tonight Show, to go to that club because he had all this kind of blackmail information on Mitch, because he is a pimp, and Mitch had been his prostitutes. So the finale sort of it tries to pack in a lot, and I think what happens is you get to see Goldie very, very desperate, and she desperately wants to regain control over her life and over her club and over these comics. I mean, because some of them are starting to defect and go to Teddy's. One of the things I kind of struggled with the show earlier on is this whole concept of Goldie having this club and then not paying her comics because it's sort of like a school for comedy, and the promises that if they do well, she'll help to get them on Carson. But these comics have to make a living too. So I kind of had a hard time believing that she would have not that comedy clubs always paid their comics, because obviously some of them I'm sure didn't, but I just felt like it would be hard for her to at least not pay them anything, and that's the part of the central drama of this show is basically that she has this stranglehold over the comedy clubs in the area in LA, that she's kind of the only portal to get to the Tonight Show and to get to Carson. and basically she blackballs all her comics from performing at other clubs. So I think that's something that I kind of, grew to kind of accept as part of the universe of this show. And once you do, it sort of, makes sense. But I'm not sure if it, like I said, if in the real world it would have worked that way. So in this finale, you get to see, her struggling with that. You get to see Bill sort of coming to terms with the death of his dad. He has this kind of dark appearance on the radio show where now the character of Eddie is writing for the show, and the DJ, who's kind of a jerk, kind of has him on, and he has all this material about being a pallbearer at his dad's funeral, and eventually, when he goes to Carson, he ends up doing the material that he had like at the beginning of the season, which I thought wasn't his strongest stuff. But I guess maybe that's the whole point of the show. So I think, and Bill is a character I kind of grew to like as the show went on, because I think that the main comic that I kind of sympathized with was Cass and Bill. When they're together at the beginning of the season, Bill kind of treats her like shit, and you have that, and I think maybe the show wants us to sympathize with Bill to a certain extent, because he gets that opportunity to do a TV show, and he sabotages it by disrupting Cass's set when they're having issues, and he bombs. And then he goes to, when she's doing her open mic at Eddie's Deli, he goes and makes a scene there. But then you sort of see Bill, later on, struggling with his relationship with his father. And, you kind of get a sense of where he's coming from. And you kind of grow to like him as the season progresses. But very early on, they spent a lot of time with Bill, and maybe that's why I was sort of tempted to tune out of this show, because you were spending time with this character I really didn't care for, and it felt like the show really wanted me to care, and I didn't. But overall, I think it takes a while to sort of warm up to all the characters. But once you do, and if you stick with the show, I think you eventually do warm up to the characters. I think in this finale you had some interesting stuff going on between Ralph and Adam. They had kind of had this conflict brewing ever since Adam kind of insulted Ralph when Ralph invited him over to his place, and Adam was just not impressed at all with what Ralph had achieved, and it really took Ralph by surprise that Adam, wasn't impressed when he was showing him, his apartment and all that stuff that he, because he works for Sonny and Cher, and look at him and how he's made it, and Adam just sort of did not pay any respect to Ralph whatsoever. And then, in this finale, Ralph sort of cuts Adam off, and Goldie had given Adam extra time because she saw that that Barton Royce was trying to woo him over to King Theodore's and make him sort of the headliner there. And so instead of what I don't understand is, why doesn't Goldie just give Adam the main stage? He certainly had the talent, but basically Adam's still in the cellar at Goldie's, and then Ralph cuts him off and unplugs his mic, and then that's what kind of precipitates Adam. Sort of, they have this confrontation, and Adam defects over to King Theodore's in this finale, and I just think that it's. It was it's interesting to see that whole dynamic develop between the two of them. But the two characters I really enjoyed following throughout the season were Ron and Eddie. And Ron and Eddie, they come to LA either during the pilot or maybe the second episode, where they're friends with Clay, who committed suicide after his Tonight Show appearance, and they were there to go and support Clay and try out the LA scene, and then they eventually they ended up sleeping in the closet in Arnie's closet, and paying Arnie rent for being for him allowing them to stay in their closet in his closet while Arnie's having sex with his girlfriend outside, and they have a really interesting friendship. My favorite episode was when they were on Let's Make a Deal. Ronnie was kind of acting like the way these shows expected the contestants to act, and Eddie was trying to explain to Eddie that these prizes like the pool table and all these things like that they can exchange it for the monetary value, because Eddie was just kind of clueless and thinking, well, if we win the pool table, what are we going to do with it? But like Ron just sort of told him, hey, you can exchange it for the monetary value, or you can sell it. And then what I loved is that towards the end they have a chance to win the car, and they ended up risking everything and getting a zonk, but they get the year's supply of rice-a-roni, and they're ecstatic that they won a year's supply of rice-a-roni, because it means that they'll always have something to eat because they were struggling. And the way I always that episode kind of sealed the deal, because I wanted to see where their relationship, where their friendship would go, and you don't get too much of them in this finale, but you do get to see Ron at the table read for the sitcom guest appearance that he was able to secure, and Ron sort of hits it out of the park, and he goes back and tells Eddie that that the agent now said that they want him back for 5 or 6 episodes, but then Eddie wants to celebrate, and then Ron kind of ignores him and proceeds to have sex with Arnie's girlfriend, and you get to see that maybe that there's bound to be some friction in their friendship, especially if the show continues. You did have what I did enjoy sticking with Ron and Eddie for a minute is that scene where Eddie's now like I said, working for the DJ who stole his joke, and he's the joke writer on the radio show, and Ron calls in as an audience member, and basically steals airtime to sort of acknowledge the fact that Eddie's writing all the jokes, and then of course the DJ gets pissed and fires Eddie on the spot, but then Eddie beats him up, and I just love that scene, and that I thought they did a really good job, even though we didn't get to see as much of Ron and Eddie as I wanted to in the finale. It was nice to see those scenes. I really enjoyed them. I think if they do decide to do a season 2, I would like to see where the friendship between Ron and Eddie go. I would like to see what what's going to happen with Cass. Because even though Melissa Leo Goldie takes Cass back to the club, it's basically to perform in the cellar, because she won't give her the main stage because she sees the fact that the cast remained on the variety show after Goldie got fired as a sort of betrayal. So it'll be interesting to see where Cass's career goes, because she has that dramatic scene with towards the end of the episode with Goldie, saying that she knows who she is now, because and then in the pilot, I believe, you had that scene where Goldie asks Cass, who are you? How, basically intimating that she doesn't know how to market Cass as a female comic, and Cass basically, because she wants desperately to get back on track and get in Goldie's good graces, she tells Goldie that she's whoever she needs to be, and that's a kind of I think it sort of speaks to some of the thematic material that this show explores, because the whole idea of this is that you see these comics sort of pursuing this dream of theirs, and a lot of times they have to compromise. I mean, especially because of the fact that they're not getting paid for their sets. They need to have day jobs. They need to have make a living somehow, and a lot of times it's sort of they have to make choices, and sometimes they're very difficult choices. And I think with Cass, you see her make the choice to sort of, become, to try to regain Goldie's trust, because she knows that, without Goldie, she may not be able to get very far. And you see that sort of theme play out throughout the season. I mean, the character of Sully, who's kind of a salesman, he takes this job as a salesman earlier on in the season, and he has to shave off his beard, he has to change his entire look, and he breaks up. He ends up leaving his wife after this wild party one night early on, a few episodes back, and in this episode he goes back to his wife after his scene with Bill, after Bill had done the Tonight Show, and basically. He knows that he's not going to get very far, so he goes back to his wife and he tells his wife, I'm a salesman. So I'm guessing that may even be the last we see of Sully, even if this goes to a season 2. And I think the stuff with Bill in the finale I thought was pretty good. Like I said, he gets the Tonight Show. And I don't think it's the show. I think we all know it wasn't deserved. In the audience, but and in the material he does on the Tonight Show is kind of like his old material. But you get the scene afterwards with Sully where he talks about how more than anything he wanted his dad there, even though he had been kind of shitting on his dad, and then he literally had pissed on his dad's the dog. When the dog had died, he pissed on the dog's grave, and that's kind of what made him estranged from his father. And then you had that very cathartic scene in the last episode or the episode before, where his dad left him the car that he committed suicide in, and he's driving around the car, and then one night he's with Cass and Nick Beverly, and they're all riding around. And he stops and he destroys the car. And I thought that was a very powerful scene a few episodes back. So yeah, I'd like to see if we do get a season 2. I think we'll be more familiar with these characters, but I do hope we get to see more new characters, see how maybe the dynamic changes for some of these characters. I don't want to see Cass get back together with Bill. I think if that happens, I might get bored. But I think. Definitely, if they have a friendship there that, maybe they can explore a little bit more. But I'd like to see Cass move on. Cass had a little thing with, almost had a fling with Eddie, because Eddie, got brave one night and kissed her. So maybe there's potential there for, some kind of, evolution in their kind of relationship, whether or not it'll either remain platonic or not. We'll see what happens. I really hope that this show gets renewed. I think it's a solid show. I think maybe it just over the course of the 10 episodes, some viewers might have tuned out, and that's a shame. I think if this is a show that you tried and maybe gave up on, you should definitely maybe try to pick it up again. And I think if you stick with it, you'll like it. I certainly did. I mean, there were times earlier on in the season where I wanted to tune out, but I'm glad that I stuck with it. It's a solid show, and I hope that it does get renewed.
Enjoyed this episode of the Pop Culture Juke Joint? Then don't forget to tip the barkeep by subscribing and reviewing us on iTunes and Stitcher. Also, For some sizzling noir tales, head on over to Amazon to check out Anthony's hard-boiled fiction, available in print, digital, and audiobook formats. On social media, follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony Venutolo or like his page on Facebook. For everything else, please visit his webpage at www.anthonyvenutolo.com. We'll see you next week.